The champagne flute slipped from Destiny Washington's fingers in slow motion, crystal shattering against Italian marble like her life was about to shatter in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. One moment she was laughing at her cousin's joke during Thanksgiving dinner in their Atlanta mansion, the kind of estate that made even other billionaires pause with envy. The next moment the room tilted violently. Her vision blurred. The faces of 50 family members twisted into grotesque masks of concern as her body betrayed her, crumpling like discarded silk. "Destiny!" Her mother's scream pierced through the chaos. But Destiny couldn't respond, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except feel her consciousness slipping away like sand through desperate fingers as darkness swallowed everything whole. Before we continue with what happens next, and trust me, you won't believe where this goes, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Are you Team USA, UK, Nigeria, Ghana, Canada? Let me know. And if you're new to Heart Vault Stories, hit that subscribe button right now, because this tale of greed, betrayal, and shocking resurrection will have you on the edge of your seat. Now back to Destiny's nightmare. 3 hours later, Emory University Hospital's VIP wing hummed with controlled urgency. Destiny Washington lay motionless in a private suite that cost $15,000 per night, pocket change for the Washington family. Machines beeped rhythmically, tracking a life suspended between consciousness and the void. Dr. Keisha Marshall, Destiny's childhood friend and personal physician, stood over the bed with a tablet displaying scan results that made her blood run cold. "It's a ruptured aneurysm that somehow sealed itself," she explained to the family gathered in expensive grief. "She's in a deep coma. We don't know when or if she'll wake up." Destiny's mother, Victoria Washington, collapsed into a chair, her Chanel suit creased with anguish. Her younger brother, Terrence, paced like a caged panther, his jaw clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. But it was Damon Pierce, Destiny's husband of 4 years, whose reaction Dr. Marshall found most interesting. He stood apart from the family, his handsome face arranged into an appropriate expression of concern. But his eyes were calculating, cold, measuring something invisible. "Whatever she needs," Damon said, his voice perfectly pitched with husbandly devotion. "Money is no object. My wife gets the best of everything. My wife." The possessiveness in those words made Dr. Marshall's skin crawl. What none of them knew, what Damon himself had only discovered 2 weeks earlier during a private meeting with Marcus Washington's estate attorneys, was that Destiny's father had updated his will. Marcus Washington, the tech mogul who'd built a $12 billion empire from nothing, was dying of pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Weeks left, maybe days. And Destiny was the sole heir to everything. The attorney's words had burned themselves into Damon's brain like a brand. If Miss Washington survives her father, she inherits with full autonomous control. However, if she predeceases him or dies before the estate is settled, her spouse gains executor control until any children reach majority age. The attorney had paused, studying Damon with barely concealed distaste. "Mr. Washington has also included a post-nuptial clause that activates upon Miss Washington's recovery, limiting your access to marital assets to $10,000 monthly." He was, quite specific about this. Damon had left that meeting with his mind racing, his charm cracking at the edges. $10,000 a month? After living in penthouses, driving Ferraris, and wearing Rolex watches like candy? After 4 years of playing the perfect husband to secure his future? Marcus Washington was trying to cut him off, trying to reduce him back to what he was before Destiny, a mediocre former college athlete with a failed consulting business and maxed out credit cards. But Marcus Washington hadn't counted on fate intervening, hadn't counted on his daughter's fragile mortality giving Damon an opportunity that made his heart race and his palms sweat. Now standing in that hospital room surrounded by the scent of antiseptic and desperation, Damon Pierce made a decision that would damn his soul. He would inherit those billions. One way or another, that night after the family had finally gone home to rest, Damon remained in Destiny's room. The nurse had stepped out for coffee. He was alone with his comatose wife, alone with the woman carrying his child. The woman who'd loved him unconditionally, the woman who now stood between him and unimaginable wealth. He approached her bedside slowly. Moonlight filtered through expensive curtains, casting silver shadows across Destiny's face. She looked peaceful, innocent, beautiful even in unconsciousness. His hand reached out trembling and touched her throat, so delicate, so vulnerable. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking with something that might have been genuine regret once, lifetimes ago. "But I can't go back to being nobody." His phone buzzed, a text from Shayla, his mistress. "Did you do it yet? We're running out of time." Damon pulled his hand back as if burned. Not yet, not tonight. He needed to plan this perfectly, needed it to look natural when. The door opened suddenly. Dr. Marshall stood there, her eyes sharp and suspicious, taking in his proximity to Destiny. The guilt written across his face in invisible ink only she could read. "Just checking on her," Damon said smoothly, the charm snapping back into place like a mask. "Can't sleep knowing she's like this." Dr. Marshall didn't smile. "How convenient that you're always here, alone, at night." "I'm her husband." "Yes," Dr. Marshall said softly, dangerously. "You are." After he left, she stood by Destiny's bed for a long moment, her instincts screaming warnings her evidence couldn't yet prove. Something was wrong with Damon Pierce, something rotten beneath that handsome exterior. She made a decision then, one that would later save Destiny's life. She would be watching. But 3 days later, when Marcus Washington died peacefully in his sleep, and Damon Pierce's window of opportunity slammed open like a door to hell itself, watching wouldn't be enough. What will Damon do to secure those billions? And can Dr. Marshall stop him before it's too late? The next part will shock you to your core. The viewing for Marcus Washington was the funeral of the century, a celebration of black excellence that drew tech moguls, politicians, celebrities, and community leaders from across the nation. The Ebenezer Baptist Church overflow crowd spilled onto Auburn Avenue as people paid respects to a man who'd built an empire and never forgotten where he came from. But in the VIP section, Damon Pierce sat next to his comatose wife's space, his face arranged into grief, his mind calculating timelines with the precision of a chess master planning checkmate. The will reading is scheduled for 3 days from now. 3 days until he'd officially control everything. 3 days until Destiny's trust fund, her stock portfolios, her father's companies, all of it, would fall under his executive power, unless she woke up. The thought made his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. The doctors said she was showing increased brain activity. Dr. Marshall had mentioned something about encouraging signs and potential emergence from the coma within the week. Within the week. He didn't have a week. After the funeral, while Victoria Washington sobbed in her daughter's hospital room and Terrence handled business calls with barely controlled rage, Damon slipped away to make a call from his Maybach parked in the hospital garage. "It has to be tonight," he told Shayla, his voice low and urgent. "Her brain activity is increasing. If she wakes up before the will is settled, I get nothing. We get nothing." Shayla's voice came through his AirPods, sharp with impatience. "So stop talking about it and do it already. You've had weeks, Damon. I'm not waiting forever while you grow a conscience." "I don't have a conscience," he snapped. "I have caution. There's a difference." "Then be cautious with $12 billion in your account. Do it tonight, or I'm done, and I'll make sure everyone knows what you've been planning." The line went dead. Damon sat in the dark garage, his reflection staring back at him from the rearview mirror. Who was this man? When had ambition curdled into something monstrous? He'd loved Destiny once, hadn't he? Or had he only loved what she represented, access, status, wealth, escape from his mediocre existence? It didn't matter anymore. He'd come too far, wanted too much, sacrificed too much of his soul to turn back now. That night at 2:15 a.m., Damon executed his plan with terrifying precision. He'd spent $5,000 bribing nurse Jennifer to take her break early, slipping 2 crushed Ambien into her coffee during shift change. She'd be unconscious in the break room within 20 minutes, and the security cameras on this floor had mysteriously malfunctioned thanks to a $50,000 payment to an underpaid maintenance worker. But what Damon didn't know, what his arrogance prevented him from seeing, was that Dr. Keisha Marshall had been preparing for this exact scenario. Days earlier, she'd installed a hidden camera in Destiny's room, concealed inside what looked like a standard medical air purifier. She'd also prescribed herself overnight shifts, watching from the monitoring station with the vigilance of a guardian angel waiting for the devil to make his move. At 2:47 a.m., Damon Pierce entered his wife's room for the last time as a free man. Dr. Marshall watched her screen with her heart hammering, her phone already dialing 91,1 but waiting. She needed him to incriminate himself completely, needed evidence so irrefutable that even the most expensive lawyers couldn't twist reality. Damon approached Destiny's bed like a man approaching an execution he didn't want to perform but couldn't avoid. Moonlight painted everything in shades of silver and shadow. The machines beeped steadily, tracking a life hanging by threads. He reached for the monitor controls first, muting all alarms with practiced efficiency. Then he stood over his pregnant wife, his hands trembling, his breath coming in short gasps. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered, tears streaming down his face, real tears because somewhere in the wreckage of his soul, he recognized the magnitude of what he was about to do. "I loved you, I really did. But I love money more. I love what it makes me. I won't go back to being nothing." His hands wrapped around her throat. Destiny's eyes remained closed, but inside her paralyzed body, her consciousness screamed. She was aware, trapped inside her own flesh like a prisoner buried alive. She could feel everything. The pressure of his hands, the crushing of her windpipe, the betrayal burning hotter than the suffocation. No, 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 no. But her body wouldn't respond, wouldn't fight, wouldn't even gasp. The cruel biology of her condition had turned her into a witness to her own murder, helpless and horrified. Damon squeezed harder, his wedding ring catching the light mockingly. 30 seconds. 45. A full minute. Finally, Destiny's body went completely limp. The machines showed flatline, heart rate 0, oxygen 0, and brain activity 0. Damon released her throat, stumbling backwards, staring at what he'd done. His wife, the mother of his unborn child, dead by his hands. He'd actually done it. For a long moment, he just stood there, shaking before his survival instincts kicked in. He had to stage this perfectly, had to make it look natural. He reconnected the monitors carefully, checked her pulse one final time. Nothing, and then waited exactly 5 minutes before screaming for help with the anguish of a grieving husband. "Help! Somebody help! She's not breathing! Destiny, baby, no, please!" Staff flooded the room. Dr. Marshall arrived last, her face carefully neutral despite the rage burning in her chest. She'd seen everything, recorded everything. But she played her part, checking vitals, calling time of death at 3:12 a.m., watching as Damon collapsed in theatrical grief. "I'm so sorry," she told him, her voice steady. "She's gone." Dr. Raymond Cole, the corrupt physician Damon had bribed with $250,000, signed the death certificate without question. Cause of death: complications from neurological trauma. Destiny Washington was officially dead, Her body was prepared for the morgue. Damon played the devastated widower with an Oscar-worthy performance, calling family members with a breaking voice, collapsing into Victoria's arms, accepting condolences from everyone who believed his lies. But in the morgue, at 4:30 a.m., Dr. Keisha Marshall did something that would change everything. She insisted on one final examination, and that's when she felt it, the faintest, almost imperceptible flutter. A heartbeat so weak, so rare that it barely registered. Destiny Washington wasn't dead. She was in cataleptic suspension, a condition so rare that most doctors never encounter it in their entire careers. Her body had essentially shut down to preserve itself, mimicking death so perfectly that even machines were fooled. Dr. Marshall's hands trembled as she made the most important decision of her medical career. She couldn't revive Destiny here. Damon would finish the job. She couldn't trust hospital security. He'd already proven he could buy people. So she did something extraordinary and wildly illegal. She faked the body transfer to a funeral home, but instead transported Destiny to a private medical facility in South Carolina run by her mentor, Dr. Patricia Hughes. There, away from Damon's reach, away from the public eye, they would revive Marcus Washington's daughter in secret. And they would gather evidence to destroy the man who tried to kill her. But will Destiny survive? And what will happen when she finally comes face to face with the husband who strangled her? The climax will blow your mind. The Washington estate in Buckhead, Atlanta, blazed with lights in excess on a humid Friday night 4 weeks after Destiny's funeral. Damon Pierce had spared no expense for what he called a legacy celebration, though everyone knew it was really a coming-out party for his new life as one of America's youngest black billionaires. The guest list read like a who's who of hip-hop royalty, tech entrepreneurs, professional athletes, and Instagram influencers. Champagne flowed from fountains. A live band played on the terrace. Exotic cars lined the circular driveway like a luxury dealership showcase. And Damon Pierce stood at the center of it all. King of an empire built on murder. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo and a Patek Philippe watch worth more than most people's houses. His arm draped possessively around Shayla, who'd transformed from secret mistress to public girlfriend with shameless speed. She wore a dress that cost $47,000 and diamonds that caught light like fragments of captured stars. "To my beautiful wife, Destiny," Damon announced, raising a crystal flute as the crowd quieted. His voice carried perfectly. He'd been practicing this speech for weeks. She would have wanted us to celebrate life, not mourn death. She would have wanted her father's legacy to continue growing, to keep changing lives, to... The front doors exploded open with a boom that made champagne glasses tremble. At first, no one understood what they were seeing. The figure in the doorway seemed impossible, a ghost, a hallucination, a collective fever dream brought on by too much premium liquor. But then she stepped into the light, and the impossible became horrifyingly, magnificently real. Destiny Washington walked into her own memorial party. She was gaunt, her cheekbones sharp as broken glass. Her pregnancy showed clearly now, her belly round beneath a simple white dress that made her look like an avenging angel. Her natural hair framed her face in a crown of coils. But it was her eyes that stopped everyone's hearts, eyes that had seen death and decided to come back anyway, burning with purpose and fury. The band stopped mid-note. Someone dropped a plate that shattered like reality itself. A woman screamed, then another. Then chaos erupted as people stumbled backward, some running for exits, others frozen in place, brains refusing to process what couldn't possibly be real. Shayla's champagne flute slipped from her fingers, shattering against marble, an echo of Destiny's fall 4 weeks ago. She swayed, her face draining of color before fainting straight into the arms of a shocked NBA player. But Damon Pierce stood paralyzed, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. The color didn't just drain from his face. It fled like guilt fleeing light. His eyes bulged. His hands trembled so violently that his watch rattled. A sound escaped his throat that wasn't quite human, part gasp, part moan, part the dying whimper of a man watching his entire world collapse. "Hello, husband," Destiny said, her voice cutting through the pandemonium with the precision of a surgical blade. She walked forward slowly, one hand protectively cradling her belly, each step deliberate. "Surprised to see me? You shouldn't be. After all, you were there when I died." This isn't," Damon stammered, backing away until he hit a wall. "You're dead. You're buried. I saw them close the casket. This is impossible." "Impossible?" Destiny laughed, but there was no humor in it, only pain aged beyond her 28 years. "You want to talk about impossible, Damon? Let me tell you what's impossible." She pulled a remote control from her dress pocket, and suddenly every screen in the mansion, televisions, tablets, phones, and the massive projection screen by the DJ booth flickered to life simultaneously. The footage began playing. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. The location, room 847, Emory University Hospital. The view, Destiny's hospital bed from an elevated angle, showing everything in high-definition clarity. The party guests watched in absolute horror as Damon Pierce entered the frame, approached his comatose pregnant wife, muted the monitors, and wrapped his hands around her throat. You could hear everything, his whispered confession. "I loved you, baby, but I love money more." The terrible, intimate sounds of strangulation. The minute long murder was captured in excruciating detail. His clinical check for a pulse afterward. The way he arranged her body before calling for help. Several people vomited, others sobbed. The rapper recording on his phone dropped it in shock. Even the hardened athletes looked like they might faint. But Destiny never took her eyes off Damon. She watched. Him watch himself commit murder. Watched the reality sink in. Watched his entire carefully constructed future incinerate before his eyes. "I was awake," Destiny said softly into the microphone someone had dropped. Her voice carried through surround sound speakers, intimate and terrible. "The whole time, paralyzed but conscious. I felt your hands crushing my throat, felt my baby dying inside me, or so I thought. I heard you confess that money mattered more than our lives." Tears streamed down her face now, but her voice remained steady. "I experienced my own murder, Damon. Do you understand that? I was buried alive in my own body while the man I loved killed me for my father's money." Damon slid down the wall, collapsing onto the floor, his expensive tuxedo rumpling. No, I can explain. You don't understand the pressure, the debt," Shayla was threatening. "Shayla?" Destiny's laugh was sharp as broken glass. She gestured toward the unconscious woman being revived with champagne, splashed on her face. "Your accomplice? The woman you planned to spend my inheritance with? Tell me, did you two discuss how you'd spend my death?" The front doors burst open again. This time, federal agents and FBI windbreakers flooded in with the practiced efficiency of a military operation. The lead agent approached Damon with handcuffs already open. "Damon Pierce, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and racketeering. You have the right to remain silent." But Damon wasn't silent. He screamed, a primal animal sound of a man watching everything he'd killed for evaporate. He thrashed as agents restrained him, his eyes wild, spittle flying from his mouth. "She's supposed to be dead. I killed her. She was dead. This isn't real. This is..." "Oh, it's real," Dr. Keisha Marshall said, stepping through the crowd with Victoria and Terrence Washington flanking her. She looked at Damon with clinical disgust. Cataleptic suspension, the rarest medical phenomenon in modern medicine. Her body shut down so completely that it mimicked death. You're not just a murderer, Damon. You're an incompetent one. Shayla regained consciousness just in time to be handcuffed as well, her $47,000 dress dragging against the floor as agents dragged her away. She screamed about lawyers, about being innocent, about how this was all Damon's idea, throwing him under the bus with the desperation of a woman watching her Instagram-perfect future die. The party guests stampeded for exits, phones out, recording everything, already posting to social media. Within minutes, the knocker Justice for Destiny would trend worldwide. Within hours, the footage would have 200 million views. Within days, Damon Pierce's face would become synonymous with greed and evil across every platform. But in that moment, as federal agents led him away in handcuffs, Damon Pierce locked eyes with his wife one final time. "I did love you," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Before the money, before everything, I really did love you, Destiny." She stared at him for a long moment, one hand on her pregnant belly where their daughter kicked strongly, alive against all odds. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but absolute. "If that's what your love looks like, Damon, I'm grateful you chose greed. At least greed was honest about wanting to destroy me." As they dragged him away, screaming, breaking, collapsing into the kind of madness that haunts men who lose everything, Destiny Washington stood in the center of her father's mansion, surrounded by shattered champagne glasses and abandoned plates, victorious and traumatized and alive. Dr. Marshall wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Victoria rushed forward, sobbing, embracing her daughter with the fierce protectiveness of a mother who'd almost lost everything. Terrence stood guard, his jaw clenched, his eyes promising violence to anyone who even looked at his sister wrong. Outside, police lights painted the Buckhead mansion in red and blue. News helicopters circled overhead. The greatest party of Damon Pierce's life had become his funeral. Not for his body, but for his freedom, his future, and any illusion that greed could ever truly win. Destiny watched through the windows as they loaded him into a federal vehicle, his face pressed against the glass, still screaming something she couldn't hear and didn't care to. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling her daughter move, feeling life persist despite everything that had tried to end it. "It's over," Dr. Marshall whispered. But Destiny shook her head slowly. "No, it's just beginning. The final chapter awaits, and the aftermath will prove that survival is only the first victory." The weeks following Damon Pierce's arrest felt like watching a slow-motion avalanche, devastating, inevitable, and impossible to stop once it started rolling. The viral footage had been viewed over 400 million times globally. News networks ran it with blurred hands and censored audio, but everyone knew what they were watching. A husband strangling his pregnant wife for billions. It became the crime of the decade, sparking conversations about greed, domestic violence, and the dark side of inherited wealth across every platform imaginable. Destiny Washington became an unwilling icon overnight, the woman who literally rose from the dead to expose evil. Her Instagram, which she hadn't touched in months, gained 12 million followers in 72 hours. Reporters camped outside the Washington estate. Talk show hosts offered seven-figure deals for exclusive interviews. But Destiny wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in justice. And justice, she was learning, was a slow, painful, methodical beast. The Fulton County District Attorney assembled a prosecution team that read like an Avengers lineup of legal talent. They had the video evidence, obviously, that alone would have convicted Damon. But what they uncovered during the investigation made the attempted murder look almost quaint by comparison. Damon Pierce hadn't just tried to kill his wife. He'd been systematically embezzling from her accounts for 3 years, funneling money through fake consulting companies and cryptocurrency wallets. He'd forged her signature on documents transferring real estate properties into his name. He'd taken out life insurance policies on Destiny, 5 of them, totaling $50 million just 6 months before her collapse. This wasn't a crime of passion, District Attorney Monica Reeves announced at a press conference, her voice sharp with controlled fury. This was a long-term financial assassination plot. Mr. Pierce married Destiny Washington with the intention of eventually inheriting her wealth, one way or another. When Mr. Marcus Washington updated his will to protect his daughter, Damon Pierce simply accelerated his timeline. The evidence kept mounting. Shayla had kept text messages, hundreds of them detailing their plans, screenshots of Damon researching undetectable poisons. How long can someone survive in a coma, and cataleptic states that mimic death? Bank records show the $250,000 bribe to Dr. Raymond Cole, who was arrested and lost his medical license within 48 hours. Then there were the witnesses who came forward cautiously at first, then in floods. A former teammate who remembered Damon joking about marrying rich to die rich. A bartender who'd overheard him and Shayla planning how they'd redecorate the Washington estate after Destiny was gone. Destiny's own brother, Terrence, who testified that Damon had actually asked him about the timeline for Marcus Washington's will being executed just days before the murder attempt. The trial was scheduled for 9 months away, but Damon's public defenders, he couldn't afford private attorneys now. All his assets were frozen, advised him to plead guilty. The evidence was insurmountable. The video was irrefutable. The public hatred was nuclear. But Damon refused. In his jail cell at Fulton County Prison, Damon Pierce was deteriorating rapidly. Guards reported he barely ate, barely slept, spent hours rocking back and forth mumbling about ghosts. Other inmates despised him, even criminals had codes, and pregnant women were off limits. He was attacked twice in the showers, once seriously enough to require 18 stitches. His mental evaluation came back inconclusive. Was he faking insanity to set up a defense, or had the weight of his actions genuinely broken his mind? The psychiatrist couldn't say for certain, noting only that Damon claimed Destiny's ghost visited him nightly, strangling him the way he'd strangled her, whispering that she'd never let him rest. Good, Destiny said when Dr. Marshall shared this information during one of their therapy sessions. They meet twice weekly now. Destiny was determined to heal, to process the trauma, to not let Damon's evil poison the rest of her life. Shayla, meanwhile, had turned state's witness with the speed of a woman who valued freedom over loyalty. She provided prosecutors with everything: emails, recordings, handwritten plans she'd kept like souvenirs. In exchange, her attempted murder charge was reduced to conspiracy, her sentence capped at 25 years with the possibility of parole. She betrayed him without hesitation, Terrence told Destiny over dinner one evening, his voice dripping with contempt. Threw him under the bus so fast he didn't even see it coming. Destiny pushed her food around her plate. She was 7 months pregnant now, her daughter kicking strongly, a constant reminder of what she'd almost lost. They deserved each other. Greed attracts greed. Evil recognizes evil. You doing okay? Terrence asked gently, studying his sister's face. She looked stronger now than she had weeks ago, physically healthier, emotionally steadier, but there were shadows under her eyes that hadn't been there before. Trauma did that. Changed you at the cellular level. I'm surviving, Destiny said softly. Some days that's enough. But surviving wasn't enough for Destiny Washington. She'd inherited her father's empire, all 12 billion of it, and she intended to transform it into something meaningful. Something that would honor Marcus Washington's legacy while healing her own wounds. She started with the Marcus Washington Foundation for Domestic Violence Survivors, funded with $500 million. It would provide legal aid, safe housing, counseling, and financial independence training for women trapped in abusive relationships. She hired 50 staff members in the first month alone, Then she restructured her father's companies, shifting priorities toward ethical practices and community investment. The Washington Tech Group began partnering with HBCUs, creating scholarships and internship programs. The real estate holdings were converted, and 20% of properties became affordable housing for single mothers and low-income families. "Your father would be proud," Victoria Washington told her daughter one afternoon as they reviewed foundation applications together. Victoria looked older now, grief aging her prematurely, but there was fierce pride in her eyes when she looked at Destiny. "I hope so," Destiny whispered, one hand on her belly. "I'm trying to make sure his legacy is about more than money, about what money can do when it's guided by love instead of greed." As the weeks crawled toward Damon's trial date, the media circus never truly died down. But Destiny learned to tune it out, focusing instead on preparation, both for becoming a mother and for the courtroom confrontation that loomed ahead. Dr. Marshall had become her anchor, her godmother-in-waiting, the woman who'd literally saved her life. Their bond was unbreakable now, forged in the crucible of conspiracy and resurrection. And late at night, when nightmares woke Destiny with the phantom sensation of hands around her throat, it was Dr. Marshall she called. It was Dr. Marshall who reminded her that she'd survived the impossible, that she'd won. But victory felt complicated when you had to die to achieve it. The night before Damon's trial was set to begin, Destiny stood in her father's study, now her study, looking at a framed photo of Marcus Washington. He smiled back at her, proud and strong, the man who'd built everything and never forgotten his humanity. "I survived, Daddy," she whispered to the photograph. "And I'm going to make sure he pays for every second of what he tried to take from us." Her daughter kicked hard, as if in agreement. Tomorrow justice would finally have its day in court. But will the trial bring closure or open new wounds? 2 years later. The morning sun filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows in Destiny Washington's penthouse office, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. From her desk on the 40th floor of the Washington Tech Tower in downtown Atlanta, she could see the entire city sprawling below. A city her father had helped build, a legacy she was transforming with every decision she made. But this morning, Destiny wasn't looking at spreadsheets or reviewing foundation applications or taking meetings with venture capitalists. This morning, she was on the floor of her office playing with her daughter. Maya Grace Washington, 2 years old, wore a yellow dress covered in butterflies and had her mother's eyes, intelligent, curious, filled with joy that trauma had tried but failed to extinguish. She giggled as she stacked blocks, then knocked them over with the gleeful destruction only toddlers could manage. "Mama, look!" Maya pointed at her creation, then demolished it with tiny hands. "I see, baby girl," Destiny laughed, the sound coming easier now than it had in those first terrible months. "You're a builder and a destroyer, just like your granddaddy." The trial had lasted 6 weeks, a media spectacle that had dominated every news cycle. Destiny had testified for 11 hours over 3 days, recounting in excruciating detail what it felt like to be conscious while being strangled, to feel her unborn daughter's life hanging by threads, to hear the man she'd trusted confess that money mattered more than their lives. The jury had deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Damon Pierce was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge had been particularly harsh, noting that the premeditated nature of the crime, combined with the victim's pregnancy and vulnerability, warranted the maximum penalty under Georgia law. Destiny had been in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She'd watched Damon's face crumble, watched him mouth, "I'm sorry," one final time before they led him away in chains. She hadn't responded. Some apologies were too late, too small, too meaningless against the weight of what they tried to excuse. Shayla had received 25 years and would be eligible for parole in 15 years. Her Instagram empire had collapsed overnight, followers vanishing like smoke, sponsorships evaporating, her influencer dreams buried under the rubble of her greed. Dr. Raymond Cole, the corrupt physician, got 10 years for accepting bribes and falsifying medical records. His career was destroyed, his reputation ashes. But justice, Destiny had learned, wasn't the same as healing. Healing took longer, required more effort, demanded therapy appointments and PTSD management, and learning to trust again when trust had been weaponized against you. She'd done the work, was still doing the work, would probably always be doing the work, because trauma didn't disappear just because you wanted it to. But she was here, alive, raising her daughter in truth instead of lies, building something meaningful with the wealth that Damon had killed for and failed to claim. The Marcus Washington Foundation had helped over 3,000 women escape abusive situations in 2 years. They'd funded legal battles, provided safe houses, offered job training and financial literacy programs. Destiny met with survivors regularly, heard their stories, and saw herself reflected in their strength. Her father's companies thrived under her leadership, not just financially, but ethically. She'd cleaned house, removing executives who'd cut corners or exploited workers. The Washington name meant something different now. Integrity. Community investment, proof that wealth could be a tool for good instead of a weapon. Dr. Keisha Marshall stopped by the office most afternoons, often bringing lunch, always bringing love. She'd become more than Maya's godmother. She was family in the truest sense, the woman who'd believed in destiny when death itself seemed certain. "How are you doing today?" Dr. Marshall asked, settling onto the floor next to Destiny and Maya with the ease of someone who'd done this 100 times. "Good days," Destiny said honestly. "More good days than bad now. That's all we can ask for." They watched Maya play for a while in comfortable silence. Then Destiny said quietly, "I got another letter from him yesterday. Forwarded from the prison." Dr. Marshall's jaw tightened. "You don't have to read them." "I know. I burned it, just like I burn all of them." Destiny's voice was steady, certain. "He doesn't get my attention anymore, not even my anger. He's just gone, buried in the consequences of his choices." "Good." Dr. Marshall squeezed her hand. "That's growth, Destiny. Real growth." Later that evening, as the sun set over Atlanta, Destiny took Maya to visit Marcus Washington's grave in Oakland Cemetery. It was their Sunday ritual, bringing fresh flowers, telling Maya stories about the grandfather she'd never meet, keeping his memory alive in ways that honored his humanity instead of just his wealth. "Granddaddy," Maya said, touching the granite headstone with small fingers still sticky from juice. "That's right, baby. Your granddaddy. He was a good man, a builder, a king." Destiny knelt beside her daughter, one hand on the stone that marked her father's final resting place. "And he loved you before you were even born." "Love you, Granddaddy," Maya said solemnly, then kissed the stone with childish sweetness that made Destiny's throat tight. "I survived, Daddy," Destiny whispered as she did every Sunday. "Your legacy is safe, and Maya will grow up knowing that love isn't about money or control or possession. It's about showing up, about choosing someone's well-being over your own comfort, about building instead of destroying." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the scent of magnolias and possibility. As they walked back to the car, Maya's hand in hers, Destiny felt something she hadn't felt in those dark months after her resurrection. Peace. Not perfect peace. Trauma had changed her permanently, left scars that would never fully fade. But peace nonetheless. She'd refused to let evil She'd write her ending, refuse to let greed define her father's legacy, refuse to let attempted murder be the final chapter of her story. Instead, she'd turned survival into purpose, turned trauma into testimony, turned billions of dollars into bridges that lifted other women out of the darkness she'd barely escaped. That night, after Maya was asleep in her butterfly-themed bedroom, Destiny stood on her penthouse balcony looking out at Atlanta's glittering skyline. Somewhere in a prison cell, Damon Pierce was living with the ghosts of his choices. Somewhere in another facility, Shayla was counting down years lost to greed. But Destiny Washington was here, breathing, building, loving her daughter, honoring her father, proving every single day that you could stare death in the face and choose life anyway. She placed a hand over her heart, feeling it beat strong and steady, the heart that had flatlined, that had been strangled, that had refused to quit. "I'm still here," she whispered to the night, to her father's memory, to every woman who'd ever been underestimated or targeted or nearly destroyed by someone who claimed to love them. "And I'm never letting anyone make me disappear again." Destiny Washington's story teaches us that greed will always destroy itself, but truth, no matter how long it's buried, will always rise again. The love of money truly is the root of all evil, turning hearts cold and hands violent. But resilience, truth, and integrity are more powerful than any fortune. Remember, wealth means nothing if it costs you your humanity. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive when the world expects you to break. If this story moved you, touched your heart, or opened your eyes, don't forget to subscribe to Heart Vault Stories. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful stories like this one. Share this with someone who needs to hear that survival is possible, that evil doesn't win, and that truth always finds the light. Drop a comment telling us, what would you have done in Destiny's position? And where are you watching from today? This is Heart Vault Stories, where every tale touches the heart and opens the soul. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over until you say it is. Subscribe now. Your next life-changing story is just one click away.